The concept I'm going to explain, I'm going to show you in a diagram as well, is something really important to see on this path. And it's all to do with devotion and interest. Now, don't switch off just yet, right? I know it's the boring thing, right? Being interested, being devoted. Like, people seem to, like, if I made a video with that titled, people would not click on it. And it's the craziest thing is the videos that I've uploaded that have the least amount of views are the most important things. At least in the way that I see it. It's weird how it works. The most esoteric are the videos with the least amount of views. The things that are actually the most important, that I'm like, this is really like a really significant aspect. People aren't like interested in it. It's interesting how it works. But what I'm going to show you is something that is the most significant thing that I can share, because it's actually the energy that carries you through this entire path. And if you think about it, the question that always begs people is, why do some people wake up and not others? Why are some people interested in the truth and some people aren't? Why is it that some people wake up and some people don't? We don't need to entertain that question. The only thing we need to entertain, and I'm not avoiding that question, I'm redirecting the energy of the intention of that question towards a better question. Am I interested in truth? That's a really interesting question to ask. Am I interested in truth? And the reason why doing this is of benefit is because there is only one requirement for unconditional happiness, which is what we speak about here in this channel and in my community, is that you are interested in truth. You don't have to be or do anything else. Your interest will carry you. This is the craziest thing. Why is it that some people wake up quicker than other people? Time obviously, the people who are here right now, obviously, you surely aren't convinced still that time exists as an actual thing. There is one infinite now, and that now is the same now that it's the only now that takes place. If you imagine a movie screen, the screen of the movie can play Star Wars, Star Trek, friggin' Teletubbies, or Lord of the Rings. They take place in different times, and the movies go through successions of time themselves, but the screen is the same screen. It doesn't pass through time. So people say, well, Saja, you're so young. How have you woke up yet? Almost skeptical, right? You don't need to be skeptical. I mean, you can be. It doesn't make a difference to me. The point is happiness. If I don't care about being right or wrong in a philosophical sense, I just like being happy, and I am happy, which is why I share these videos. And those who see that will see it, those who don't won't. The main point to see is that I'm interested. I'm very, very, very interested in truth and happiness. And that is the only requirement. So I've seen other interviewers with people around my age, maybe a bit younger, on interviewers. The interviewer's saying, well, you're so young. What kind of credibility do you have? Or how has this happened so quickly to you? And people think time equates to experience. People think that you need time in order to experience. You don't. I'll give you an experience of timeless experience right now. The very fact that you're alive, the very fact that you are able to experience awareness. People say you can't experience awareness. You can. It's actually it's the only experience we're having, right? The illusory experience is what you think experience is, which is phenomena, right? Phenomenal experiences. The experience we're actually having is of reality, and reality is absolute. We're always experiencing the absolute. It has no space, border, or dimension. Everything is filtered then through beliefs. These beliefs are a collection of thoughts. Those thoughts are vibrations that we attach the meaning to. The meaning is the idea. The idea is then another thing, and it just basically is a collection of thought on thought on thought. And that's what actually builds what we call the physical world. So when we say, does it take time? Of course it doesn't take time, because the understanding of our true nature is timeless. So how is it going to take time? Why would it make sense to take time? It doesn't. The only thing that doesn't exist is time. So how's it going to take time to realize something timeless? So we have to see that time doesn't equate to experience. Experience equates to time. So it's not the other, we're seeing it backwards. And what is it that propels experience? In other words, what is it that propels one towards truth or not truth, or ignorance or unignorance? It's interest. It's in what we're interested in. People say that desire is the word desire has been bastardized by the Buddhist traditions and the Indian traditions. Desire is the purest form of energy. Will, intention, desire is the purest form of energy. It's energy in its purest form. So when I say the universe is made of desire, it's because it is. It's made of the desire to be, the will of life, the will. It's pure energy in motion. That's what it is. So our intention to move towards truth is our interest in truth. And eventually that interest grows into devotion. And now there's two paths. Basically, there's this. So if you look at this diagram, what you'll find is truth and happiness is at the top. And what we have here are the lower three chakras. And these are primarily based on survival and creativity. The survival and creativity are literally the things that make us build a fire. We want to build a fire. We want to build a tent. Build a hut. That makes us want to build farms for animals. And they're the things that make us do things to contain and maintain experience. And then the other thing is the creative measures. Oh, let me build, maybe if I take this wood, cut it into this shape, I can make a fence. And if I make a fence, I can make my own land. And if I treat this land as my own, I can start making other little bits of land, and I can put cows in there and this in there, and I can save my horses. And we start being a bit more creative. All of these things here, these are the lower three chakras, the sacral root, blah, blah, blah. And they're the energy, they're representations of energy. If you imagine the little guy, he's like meditating here. If he's meditating there, these are the chakras going up to the top, right? With throat chakra, third eye chakra, these are representations of energies that create, sustain and maintain physical experience. Now, if you want spiritual insight, let's just call it spiritual understanding, you cannot use these three energy centers to find truth. You can't. You cannot use them because these chakras do stuff in the physical. Their energy, will, interests that take you to physical places, that maintain, sustain the physical experience, namely the gross body, not the gross in is iwi and icky, the gross is in gross and physical. So you can't use them, but 99% of the spiritual seekers will use these three energies, you could say, to get to here. But you can't. You just physically can't. It is capped because it is literally like trying to pour water on the carpet in order to drink the water. It's like, well, if you pour it on the carpet, it's not going to get into your mouth, right? It's just physically impossible. So using these three chakras here to get here is never going to work. It only gets you here. You see? So what is it then that gets you here? What is it that allows you to transcend through those layers of the chakras? Now we're being very metaphysical here. We're being very we're being very poetic here, right? Whether the chakras are really there or not, it doesn't make a difference. But there are energies that they represent. And how then do we go from these lower three over to truth and happiness? They're the same thing, because the truth is happiness, happiness is truth. You have to go through these, right? How do you get through them? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to stop trying to remove your suffering. You have to stop trying to get from this part to this part by removing suffering. Because if you do that, you are going to continue to do more of this, to get more of this. If you do more of this to get more of that, well, you're only going to get more of that. And that isn't this. You see? So, what is it that we do then? We simply get interested in truth. Because at this stage, we're only interested in removing suffering. Now, to get through here, we are interested in truth. That's it. The number one requirement. The difference between the one who takes 20 years and the one who takes one. The one who takes 20 years is doing this, right? Is getting lost in all that mess. The one who takes 1 year was just interested in truth. It's the only difference. Now, you could then ask the question, how do I get more interested in truth? Well, here's the thing. You don't need to get more interested in truth. Truth isn't something you have to get more interested in. If you're interested, you're already interested. Now, the question is, to what extent are you still devoted to the world? Meaning, to what extent do you still want to hold on to any attempt of finding happiness in the world? This is what this stuff is. This is attempts to do physical things to get happiness. You cannot get happiness doing physical things. You can't get truth doing physical things. So what happens then is that we realize there are conditions I have on my happiness, and those conditions will set the trajectory for how much devotion and interest I still have in finding it in the world. So we'll call this worldly interest. Then we'll call the alternative truthly interest, or does that even sound right? Truthy interest, or worldly interest. Now, what we call a Kundalini awakening is literally when the complete surrender of worldly interest, all of this stuff, we realize there is no possibility of finding happiness by doing any of this. And all of a sudden, that realization takes us all the way up here. It awakens us. That is the representation of the serpent climbing up the spine, going all the way to truth and happiness. Does that make someone like permanently liberated? I don't know. I don't think it does. In fact, no, I don't think it does at all. The reason being is because this just makes one this one makes now a devotion to truth. Someone now at this stage is devoted to truth. That means 100% of their interest is towards the truth, which means then day to day, you could say one's mind is open and receptive to experiencing the limitations that they previously resisted or ignored. Now, we're no longer seeking truth. This is why a Kundalini awakening is actually the end of seeking, and it happens via a path of understanding. It's not an actual, people talk about I had a Kundalini awakening and I felt the serpent on my spine. It was really hot and exciting. And all of that stuff it means nothing if it didn't come with the package of now being 100% devoted to truth. And that, you don't need to have that experience. You don't need to literally have an experience of some energy climbing up your spine. In most cases, that was probably already happening gradually in a long period of time you didn't notice. But that is not necessary. That's not necessary in any way, shape, or form. You don't need to have that experience. You do, however, need to come to the realization, regardless of what spine climbs up, spine, snakes, or whatever, you need to have the realization that there's nothing absolutely at all you can do in the world, not know through teachers, books, material objects, or spiritual practices that you could ever possibly do to find happiness. You cannot find it anywhere. This then means that you have no time left or no resource or reason to go into the world in order to seek happiness or peace. So then where does your energy go? It goes to truth, you see? It goes all the way up. So now you're devoted to truth. Now you can't just be, let's just say that we had a scale, right? Let's just say that we had, this is devotion to truth, this is devotion to the world, right? We could be 99% of the way. Actually, let's reframe this. So let's just say this is the bar that you've got to get to, right? Let's just say this is your devotion to truth. And you're like, oh yeah, but I'm 99% devoted to truth. Look, there's just a 1%, one little baby percentage of me that is still partially interested in the world. So if you're 99% devoted to truth, then you are 1% devoted to the world. But here's the craziest thing. This is its own 100% devotion to world. You cannot be 99% devoted to the world. That is the definition of not being devoted, you see? So true devotion is when this is met the entire way. Because otherwise, this little 1% here of devotion to the world, you're going to, that 1% will go, you'll go, well, there's still 1% left. Because there's only 1% left, may as well go out and figure it out and find it. You may as well be 0% devoted to truth if you're going to have the 1%, right? So the reason I'm explaining it in this way, some people might think it might not make sense, but the reason I'm explaining it in this way is because this creates an understanding. And you can get more interested by understanding. Understanding transcends time. It transcends experience. Understanding is a timeless experience. When you have an equation, 1 + 1 = 2, this happens in the head. The 1, the plus, and the 1 take place in the mind, right? They're formulated in the mind. This equals, right? The place where the answer comes from happens outside. It happens outside the mind. Where is outside the mind? Well, think of it like this. If you have a calculator and you have a calculation on the calculator that says 1 + 1 = 2, the calculator doesn't know the answer, right? The answer 2 doesn't really exist in the calculator. It exists in you. It exists in you. You know the answer, not the calculator. Now, your mind is like a calculator, and the answer 2 is formulated as 2, right? It answers as 2 in the mind, but the pause between the question and the answer takes place outside the mind. In other words, it doesn't take place in the form of a thought, a feeling, or a perception, which is what the mind is. It takes place in consciousness. It takes place in the absence of mind. And that place is the absolute. That's a place from which all things are created. So we understand the answer and we formulate it as the answer 2. So this is where all understanding takes place. It takes place outside the mind. So when you have an experience of understanding, you have a timeless experience, which does not equate to time, which makes age and anything else irrelevant. So the process of understanding is the process of developing wisdom. So what is wisdom? So the process of understanding creates wisdom. Wisdom is spontaneous intelligence. That is a little 2-ass long words. Intelligence. I should add creative to that too, but I do not have enough page to write so many big words at once. So it creates spontaneous, creative intelligence. Spontaneous, creative intelligence is pretty much every conversation you have. The fact I'm talking right now, and I don't know what the next thing that's going to come out of my head is creative intelligence. When you talk to the person in the cafe behind the barista, you say, "How's your day?" He says, "Yeah, day was really good, thanks." You say, "Hey, what's the square root of 56?" You didn't know you were going to say that, but it all came out perfectly. Every other conversation that you have with anyone is going to be the same quality. It's going to be pure spontaneous creativity. When we come to this equation, we understand that understanding takes place outside the mind, which means when we come back to this mess, understanding takes us to truth and happiness. And we channel understanding by interest in truth. And we can project our interest in the form of thought experiments or thought yoga, which is what I share in my community, where we just simply look at the landscape of possibilities of finding happiness in the world. In other words, we look for the conditions on our happiness and we see whether those are legitimate conditions. what we find is that they never are. Then we look at our body and our mind and see, well, what limitations make me convinced that I'm limited? These are expressions of interest. They're not expressions of removing suffering. These are inquiries based on interest, just like a scientist would explore science, or artists would explore art. These are done on the premise of art and not on the premise of doing these things. Art is a this thing process. It's not a these things process, you see? So when we use the mind in this way, we end up naturally realizing that our Kundalini awakening is already awakened. And now we're actually able to explore truth and happiness. And at this stage, it doesn't matter whether we have an awakening or not, because you're actually going to find yourself in the best position possible, which is to be exploring truth. Once you're in that mode, which I call the adventurer mode, it's as good as the goal. This is the beautiful thing about that process. The end of seeking has already come. Most people think that's the end of the spiritual path. It's not. But the thing to see is, the reason to see it's not is so you don't stop exploring. So you don't stop exploring your experience. You still see the limitations that you have, and you know and understand how to see through them. You don't need to get rid of them. Life's full of limitations. The point of it is a limitation. But the issue is when we find ourselves experiencing illusions that we think are true. So this is the process to understand your true nature. It's through interest in truth and not removing your suffering, and directing your energy and intention simply to truth, and not truth for the sake of removing suffering, because that's just more of this to get to this, which ultimately takes you back here. I have a free community. I do sessions and Q&As and meditations every single week. So if you'd like to join, I'd love to see you there. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care.